Jesus, woman.
You could probably just use the oh fuck hang on.
Yeah, I probably will just use the oh fuck hang on. It'd be easier to line up.
Oh, whoops.
Welcome. You are entering a strange realm. A realm of what ifs. What if movies, television shows, and video games were better, worse, bizarrer, or downright different? What might they look like? Find out on today's episode of CineCasters. Welcome back to the CineCasters. This is the show where we watch movies and TV shows and then pitch them back to one another with different story elements to try and make them, a bit different. It's like a deconstructionist kind of way of viewing and talking about television rather than just, saying whether it's good or bad, because there is no good or bad. I'm Janglez the Strange, and today I'm joined by Alessa.
Hi.
And today we are looking at the... we're doing a series. This is the first of the series. We're doing another CineCasters series. We are going to be doing I think there's 4 movies in the Maze Runner series.
3 movies, and there was a 4th book, I believe.
Okay, but I think the 4th book is a prequel called, like, The Death Cure? No, that's the last one. It was Maze Runner, Scorch Trial, Death Cure. Yeah, I think there's a prequel, probably called something to do with Wicked. For those who don't know...
Wicked is good.
Yeah, Wicked is good. It's a great musical. Yeah. For those who don't know, when we do a Cinecaster series, it means like the next couple episodes that Alessa and I do are going to be on the Maze Runner series, and we're going to be basically doing a continuous timeline. So whatever we pitch today is going to be pitched, like we're going to have to build off of it going forward based on what we see in future films and what we've pitched in this particular episode. So, this is going to be, I think, more difficult than what we've pitched in the past, simply because, as you were saying, you messaged me earlier today, you were saying, like, this one's hard to pitch because there's not a lot of information about what's happening.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was also weird because I felt like this could have been like a single episode in a TV show.
I felt like you could have cut it up into different episodes in a TV show. Like, it felt like when when Teresa first comes up and they're like, it's a girl. I felt like that was the perfect place to just cut and have credits roll for that episode.
There were so many spots where I was like, I know that this was supposed to be a commercial break for when they put it on TV.
Yeah, it feels like that's when you're supposed to.
You can feel it.
And I feel like this maybe should have been a TV show, as we always say, because there's a couple points in there where straight up, like when Teresa comes out, where you're just like, this is supposed to be like a place where you would roll credits for a TV show, but this feels like it could be like a full short season for a TV show.
Yeah.
But the issue, and in a lot of ways, it feels very much like Lost. Like, stuff is happening and there's developments, but any of the stuff that's happening usually adds more questions, not less questions. And
there were a lot of questions that I had. Yeah,
so we wind up with like, it's a compelling story. I'm invested in the characters, but I'm not really invested in what's happening because I don't know what's happening. So pitching this one is difficult. Now, I will say that I read the book. Have you read the books?
I believe I read the first 2 books. I don't remember about the 3rd. Maybe if I see the movie, it might remind me of stuff.
I read the first book and I really liked it. I thought it was very, very interesting. I had questions, and then I did not care for the second book, and I out and out did not enjoy the last book at all. It was, so.
I just remember not enjoying the second book.
But this one has, I was not a huge fan of the second book. This one has, at least has an up on the last major CineCasters series we did for me, which was when you and I did Divergent. When we did Divergent, it was, I really liked the pitches that we came up with, both of us, how, like, I was dealing with propaganda, and you had, like, a bit more of a standard love story, but at least it felt like both Four and Tris were like actual people, even though Four was female in yours. But there was much more of like an actual love story. I think I remember, if I remember correctly, it's been over a year. If I remember correctly, at the end, I was sort of like, I would have loved if I'd taken my messaging and then your idea to make Four a girl and an actual character and like sort of put those things together. Yeah. Because Four is not a good character. But in this, the benefit I had was I enjoyed the book. And I have to say, I did enjoy this movie.
Okay.
I was left with a lot of
That's good to
questions,
hear.
but in the best way. Like, what's going to happen next? What's going to happen next? I felt like the ramping up of what was happening was interesting. I felt like the movie had a trajectory and knew what it was trying to do. I did, however, think that there was a lot of leaps in logic and a lot of things that didn't make sense, and a lot of things that the book just sort of, or the movie just sort of takes for granted in its own internal logic, as well as its own character logic. So there are some things that I want to get into that way.
Yeah, I don't want to say I didn't like the movie, but I didn't not like the movie. I don't know. I'm pretty like straight down the middle with it. I was like pretty, I don't know, because I've seen it before. I've seen the movie before.
Oh, this is my first time watching it, so you had that up on me.
I watched it in theaters.
Oh, damn.
Actually, it was a funny story. I went with a friend because I thought that she had read the books.
And she had not.
And we got to the end of the movie, and it said, like, next up, like, the Scorch Trials or whatever. And she's like, you didn't tell me there was going to be a second movie? And I was like, whoops.
That's fine. This movie, I feel like this movie would have looked good in on the big screen.
Oh, it was beautiful on the big screen.
It looked good on the small screen. I was watching it in pretty high def, and it looked pretty good on my little TV in my bedroom because you know, the way the walls look, they look super impressive. The glade looks big but not too big, and then when you see the panoramic view of the maze at the end when they're going over top of it, it's like, you know, it's pretty impressive visually. I love the greens. This movie has like some really nice deep greens to it. The colors are,
which is it's going to change in the next movie.
Yeah, I know, it's all deserts.
Well, it's very red in the next one.
Yeah.
But anyway, so this one in theaters, the movie was gorgeous. Like that scene at night in the maze was like straight out of a horror movie.
Yeah, it's
which
pretty scary.
You know, I don't like that, but it was crazy on screen. So I do remember like really enjoying the visuals and everything when I went to see it. And then this second time through, I was just kind of like, eh.
Yeah. I could see maybe this being like astounding once, just because once you know what's going to happen, it's not really all that interesting. Because
and it felt very flat this second time through.
Oh, the characters are really flat. The book was much better at that. Thomas feels like an actual character. But the biggest, I love Dylan O'Brien. He's a very, very good looking man. So, and what's her name? Kaya Scoldilero. She's very cute. I think she's very, very cute. But yeah, I don't know. You can also tell that she's British because her accent is not great in this. She keeps breaking into a mild British accent, but it's fine. It just seems weird because like Newt has a British accent, which is also the voice actor for Ferb, by the way, from Phineas and Ferb.
Yep.
So I just think it's interesting that why wouldn't you just let her have a British accent? I don't think it really mattered.
I think if I remember correctly, there is like I don't remember if it's the second or third book where they say that she's like an American.
Yeah.
So like in the books she's American, but I don't think it really matters.
I don't think it really mattered. But we'll find out when we continue on forward. There's probably somebody screaming at their screen right now, or their speakers being like, "No, there's a reason it's canonical." And I apologize.
Probably.
It's been a long time
since I read the books.
It's like it was
probably like 14.
Yeah, I think it's been 10 years since I read these books. So
that's about the same for me then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, except 10 years for me is 20 versus 14.
Little bit of a difference.
Yeah, a bit of a difference. Yeah. Okay. So, in terms of logic problems that I had, there's sort of this idea that they've forgotten all their memories, and yet they know what things are and how to do things, and that really ticks me off because I think, you know, the way that we think about learning is like you can't differentiate what you learn from what you remember. Like those are the same thing. Now I'm not talking in like the platonic sense where you like once you've learned something it's like an aha moment because you've recalled it from some kind of like ethereal place of forms. It's like no, it's just induction. Like anytime that you see something that's similar to something you've already seen, then you start to make conclusions about how the past looks the same to the present, and then you draw on your past information to understand your present information, whether you're doing this consciously or not. All the words that you have are things that you remember and then put into place. And so I think it's impossible to like differentiate knowledge from memory, and that really, I mean, I'm not a psychologist, so I don't know about that for sure, but I'm pretty sure that's how that works, and that kind of ticks me off, that they have words, and yet they don't have memories, and they have skills, and yet they don't have memories, and yet, you know what I mean?
The other thing too, I remember in the books they had their own kind of like slang.
Yeah, they did a little bit of that. They call
we heard
Greenie
like one of them in
Shank.
this.
Yeah.
There was one where they said like I'm awful because I can't remember any of their names. The guy that Thomas was really upset after he died.
Chuck,
thank you.
The younger
Chuck said something about like he clunked his pants, or whatever, which was supposed to be like their words
they
for
use
like
clunk,
taking a poop,
whatever, taking a poop,
right? But then there was at one point in that nighttime scene where the grievers had come to the glade, and Chuck almost got taken away by one of the grievers, and the guy said, one of them's like, hold on, and he goes, no shit, and I'm like, okay, you know both words, but this isn't holding up the same kind of slang that I remember from the books.
But it's also just sort of like I know they were trying to go for a more mature feel for this particular movie, like the Hunger Games kind of thing, which I appreciated. I got it. But I also was sort of like, you know, this gritty post-apocalyptic thing that happened in young adult fiction for a while there was just super depressing. Actually, I did a whole episode on that. I don't know if you remember. Last summer, I did a whole episode on Hope Punk. Because people were just like, fuck post-apocalyptic, depressing young adult fiction. Yeah, I don't know. For me, the problem that I had with their like, even their society, I was expecting it. I mean, they allude to like, oh, those were dark days in the past. You know, we didn't have, but they don't have any sort of society. You know what I mean? Like it seems like things are actually fairly picturesque. Like when Gally, he's the sort of one of the leaders that takes over after Albie is incapacitated, and he's like, you know, Thomas's sort of main rival in the Glade. He's very much like, you know, we don't need to leave and everything's good. And it's sort of like, oh, we don't belong here. Things aren't good. And it's like, other than the grievers, your existence isn't actually really all that problematic. Like, it's pretty idealistic. You get food sent up to you. Now, that, of course, changes, and I know it changes. But I can totally see from his point of view, it's like, you know, you've sort of created some semblance of existence in just 3 years. Like, I don't fucking think so. And with no society to speak of, like, it's very structured and ordered. There's very little arguing. I mean, maybe there needed to be like more threat of the maze. Like, oh, we'll fling you into the maze, or like we need to, like, I don't know. It just felt like it felt to me like this was Lord of the Flies meets science fiction, except it wasn't enough of Lord of the Flies, because
that's exactly what I was thinking the whole time I was watching it, actually.
There wasn't enough Lord of the Flies because, I mean, oh, they've been here for 3 years, they're established, I guess, but like a whole society, and if nobody remembers anything, fuck, man. I mean, I put it in my pitch, but like they would be all up ons in terms of like what kind of societal structure would happen, what kind of religion they might have, what kind of, you know, and also when Teresa comes up and they're like, it's a girl. You're like, first of all, how the fuck you know what a girl is? Second of all, you're a bunch of sweaty hormonal boys and nobody's going to even talk about like the elephant in the room.
I'm just going to assume that they all had their hormones turned off when they got sent up or something, because there was no mention of anything.
That's what I'm saying is like
that.
I'm
just weird.
I'm saying it's okay. I'm okay with it because I know it's young adult, but I also think like you're going to send a girl as an author. I think you have to think like you're going to send a girl up into a room full of, you know, 30 odd hormonal teenage boys and not explain to the audience what either those boys are feeling emotionally or physically. Or not explain to the audience why they're not feeling those things, because that's a huge wrench in the machine, right? These boys have created this society, and then all of a sudden you're going to huck a girl up in there. Well, that changes everything, right? Because now, even without the Glade opening up, now there's the possibility of reproduction, and nobody even mentions that, right? Now we're not just talking about, you know, I'm surprised that immediately they go like, she's the last one ever, right?
And immediately I would be like, that's okay,
now
great.
The point is reproduction.
that's uncomfortable, but I guess that's what that's supposed to be, right?
And what becomes interesting out of that is now her role has been reduced to simply reproduction, right? Which as an author is problematic, but it puts you in a really interesting position to do stuff with her character. What if she doesn't want to? She doesn't remember anything either, and now all of a sudden she's been told by these mysterious people who send up a box with her in it that she's the last one forever. But that's the point that I'm making, is the logical conclusion, especially for Gally and some of his sort of faction. They don't want to leave. They're not going to send the box anymore up. They don't need any more people because they've established themselves. Reproduction is obviously what I would think when they say she's the last one ever. It's
the next step for their little society, right?
And people would say like, well, Andrew, you're complaining about the logic of the characters and how they know certain things. And it's like, yeah, but the body itself, like a human body, and I don't really think would need memories even to understand desire, right? And then we can get into topics of like consent and stuff like that, which is totally important, but it's not the point that I'm making right now, which is that like the body will sort of figure out what to do on its own, whether or not anyone consents to it, which is terrible and nasty. But it does sort of tell us like reproduction is somehow never on the table when it clearly seems to be like the first thing that you'd think would be on the table.
Exactly. It's very strange.
It is very strange. Go on.
So just kind of moving away from that, the leap in logic that really pulled me right out of the movie, and I don't even remember if this was in the books or if it bothered me in there, but again, it was like 10 years ago. But that thing when they were watching the video and it's just like the earth is scorched and suddenly there was a generation who wasn't dying to the scorch or to the flare or whatever. And so we threw you in a maze. I was like, what? Yeah. Like, what are they actually in there for? What is the real purpose of this?
They want to study the brain because they can't be infected by the virus. Well, yeah. Except I'm pretty sure in the books we find out that they can be infected.
I think, and in the second book, they find out that they're already infected.
Yeah, that all of them are already infected,
or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, what?
Yeah,
Why are you throwing these people who are immune into a maze to die instead of, I don't know, nurturing them and maybe hoping that their genes pass on so that there's another generation who are good? Like, come on.
Oh, because capitalism, right? If you can exploit somebody else for your own gain, then of course you're going to do that. If we can put people through suffering and study their brains, then we can be like, we can take that information and turn them into something we can sell or use for ourselves, right? I'm not saying that's what's going to happen. I'm not entirely certain what's going to happen, but I do see like...
I don't remember how Yeah,
I do see like the point of that. The thing, I will say it was a bit of a mindfuck at the end when it turns out they were all acting. I was like, whoa, shit. But I also think like nobody checked for a pulse.
Why would you? They all look dead.
Sure, but
as soon as I saw that video, if I were them, and they're supposed to be like the smartest generation or something like that.
Yeah, that's another thing. Never mind. Go on. I'll get to that.
If I were them and I had just watched a thing that was just like these people, like we were testing you, I'd be like, is this another test? Then I would start going around looking for pulses.
Yeah, I'd be like,
did anyone survive? Can we take anyone with us?
Yeah,
right?
When does the test end? When does it start? Like that's a question you would be asking yourself. Thomas's innate ability to solve problems, at least in the movie, feels too convenient.
Yes.
And we talked about this with the problem with young adult. He's special because he's special, and everyone thinks he's special, so he's special. He's special. And I think they actually wind up explaining that he's not in the at the end of the series. But my problem with this one is that some of the leaps in logic that he makes are just convenient. Like instead of being like, I'm going to do this because X, Y, Z. It's sort of, he's like, well, what if we tried this? And then it winds up working. Stuff is too convenient. Like he's the only one to have killed a Reaper because he crushed it in the maze. It's like, that's not smart. That's just reckless and stupid. And certainly he cares about other people. We can clearly see this, but like him taking them killing the Reaver and then being able to take the Reaver to the outside of the maze, that's also like sort of just like, well, what if they hadn't killed the Griever, sorry, I think is what they're called. Nothing would have changed. Like it's the steps in the process of the story seem to be causal. Like they appear on the surface to be causal, like a good narrative should, but they are too convenient. So they appear causal because Thomas does a thing or Thomas acts, and then an outcome happens that's not necessarily like congruent with the particular action that he has, or it's just convenient for the plot that he does that action, and then it just winds up leading to another convenient thing that has to happen in the plot. Thomas isn't actually like an active hero. He's quite passive. It's just sort of like things that are convenient to help the plot move along happen to Thomas and not anyone else. And I don't think that's supposed to be the case.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't remember how it was in the books. I gotta stop like comparing it to the books because we're not talking about the books.
We're not talking about the books. We are talking about the movie. But the source material is often a convenient place to look back and be like, I know we're talking about the movie, but it's convenient to be like, actually, this was dealt with in a more appropriate manner in the book. And I bet you it was, because books have more time. And I also think this book was told from first person. I can't remember if it's told from first person Thomas's perspective or if it's told from third person Thomas's perspective. I know it's Thomas's perspective. We never get anyone else's thoughts, but I can't remember if it's first or third person. And that makes a difference because first and third person is hugely convenient in terms of how many thoughts you want to give away from your person's perspective versus anyone else's, right? So yeah, I'd have to go back and remember whether it was first or third person, but I know that it's all from Thomas's perspective. We never get anyone else's insight or thoughts, which matters because then it's only Thomas's point of view in the book, which does make a difference. I talked about this with the Hunger Games and with Divergent. When you only get someone, when you do first person, you get that person's whole perspective, right? Their thoughts, their feelings, and you experience the world through their eyes, which makes the world feel different as apart from experiencing it through somebody else's eyes, like anybody else's, right? Because people, tint the world in their own biased way, and that comes through in narration as well. Like there are times where I think that works really well. The only reason I think it didn't work well in Divergent is because it wasn't done that way from the very beginning, so it sort of gives up the fact that Triss is going to die in the last book when all of a sudden you introduce a second narrator from Four's perspective. That's too convenient.
Yeah.
Right? It's too convenient for your last book. Doesn't make sense. But we're not talking about Divergent. We're talking about the Maze Runner.
Yes.
I did come up as soon as the flare virus, I think is what they call it, as soon as it, like they experience it by injecting it into Ben and then again into Albie later, I decided I was going to change the name of this movie. Because the flare virus reminds me of like any other zombie movie. So I've decided to call this movie 28 Maze Later. Your reaction was excellent. I know we're not a visual medium, but your face was just like, oh, come the fuck on. It's 28 Maze Later. And I'm very, very excited.
It's terrible.
No, that's terrible. Great. Get out of here. Any other problems that you had?
Okay, so I had two problems, okay? Why didn't they tell Thomas anything?
Who?
None of the boys informed him that the door's closed. They just said, it's dangerous, don't go out there.
Because intrigue.
And cinematics, right?
Yeah.
You gotta show like, oh, the doors are closing. Woo! Right? But there were so many other things. Like, why didn't they tell him that there are big, scary, half robot, half monster things out there that will try to eat him instead of, waiting until he runs out there on his own to find out? And just stuff like that. Like, and they're like, oh, well, you don't want to be a runner. You get chosen as a runner, and nobody wants to be a runner.
Yeah.
Right? And he's like, well, why? You don't tell him that there's fucking monsters out there or anything. Like, oh my God.
His want to be a runner, the movie's supposed to be like he has this innate curiosity and is like super smart or supposed to be super smart. It just comes off as convenient in the plot. But yeah, you're right. They don't really tell him anything. He sort of like left to discover it on his own. And like, that's just bad. I mean, it's good storytelling because it builds intrigue, but it's bad, just bad society. Like, you wouldn't, if you had a new kid show up, you'd be like, and it's been, there's 30 kids and they've been at it for a year or once a month you'd think somebody would be like, hey, I know how to do this now because I've been doing it for a while.
Yeah, you wouldn't want to just, try to get them into the society as quick as possible so that they can help the society as quick as possible instead of being like, oh, here's the problem. And then, let them have like a little meltdown or a freak out or whatever. Yeah. Just, anyways. And then the other thing that I had that I guess isn't really a problem with anything in the movie per se, but just the general movie itself. You know how most of the time in trilogies, the second movie is usually all set up?
Yeah.
That's what this movie felt like. I was like, is this a second movie? It feels like a second movie. I know it's the first, but
I will say that
it was all set up, not really actually that much plot really, other than just, we got to get out.
Yeah. There's not really any plot in terms of like what's happening, and it's all backloaded. It all happens at the very, very end. Like, this is a scorch trials. This is what you're going to do. This has all been a test. Like, and fuck, I wouldn't trust anything that comes out of those people's mouths. They literally stuck you in a maze, took away your memories. Like, even if they're like, wicked is good, it's like, no, like, how do I know those memories are real? Everything that you could have given me is a lie. Like, I would be so suspect if I was in a position where I had the smarts to do like what these kids have in the movie. If we were in a position where we didn't have memories or anything like that, I definitely wouldn't be smart because I wouldn't remember anything.
Exactly.
Yeah, I don't know. I also felt like it's a lot backloaded. I will say that the beginning where he's coming up on the elevator is very dramatic. It works. Like, you're instantly like, oh shit, what the fuck is happening? And you feel like that's a good way to put you in Thomas's shoes because he doesn't know who he is. We don't know who he is. All of a sudden he's in this glade. It's like, I don't know anything that's going on. This movie feels a lot like Lost in that it's like, it doesn't explain anything. Like you were saying, it feels all like set up because we don't get anything about like the big bad or what's happening or what they're supposed to be doing. It's just like, it does feel like it's a lot of setup so that we can get that out of the way in the next movie. So we do have a plot that's intriguing, but it's also very dependent on what is happening currently with no forefront, or like no longer trajectory. Even though there's two other books, there's no like long range trajectory. We need some kind of I need something dangled in front of me that makes me want to do this. And it does that at the end. It finally, this is why you're here. This is the carrot at the end of the stick. This is what's going to be happening. And you're right. It does feel like a lot of setup without actually having any like meaningful plot. It just sets up relationships. But I will say that I think those relationships weren't even set up that well. I remember in the book that Teresa and Thomas have like a very close relationship by the end of the book. And I felt like they didn't spend nearly enough screen time on Teresa in general. She's just sort of there.
Yep. I
also felt like Minho and Thomas are supposed to be really, really close. And I did...
Yeah.
Chuck's death, while meaningful, did not feel necessary.
And it felt maybe a little too... dramatic.
It was like, quite dramatic compared to Albie's or Ben's or anybody else who dies. But Chuck's is very dramatic, and it wasn't that it wasn't meaningful, and it wasn't that the acting was necessarily bad. It was just like, Chuck is not really a player in this movie. He's not important enough beyond the like scene where he's like, we got to go find our parents and I want you to give this to him. It comes across as like tokeny, like, oh, Chuck's the kid who's not going to survive because he's, you know what I mean?
He's the sweetheart.
Because he's the sweetheart.
Right?
Sure, fine. And that gives Thomas motivation, but it's what we call fridging, right? He basically gets killed, and so that our character can have motivation to do X whatever thing that needs to be done, and has a motivation for revenge or whatever. Oh, Chuck's death can't be in vain. It's like, sure, but Chuck's not really a player in this movie beyond like, I don't know. He was much more, as I recall, it was much more important in the book because Chuck was the boy who came out just before Thomas. So it was his responsibility to show Thomas around. Chuck was the greenie. Now Thomas is the greenie. And they never refer to Teresa as the greenie.
Because she's a girl.
Yeah, I mean...
So she's special.
She's special, yeah. It's all... Yeah, I don't know. I will say that I think my favorite part in the whole movie, in terms of, like... Because, you know, I just sometimes write down my, like, stream of consciousness. And so...
Stream of consciousness?
My stream of consciousness. Ah! No, that's just existential, like, stream of consciousness. When the elevator comes up and it's Teresa in it, and all the boys are, like, around it, and they're, like all looking in the pit... all I could think of was like all the boys looking at each other going, "It's a girl, gulp." Like that's all I could like in the classic, and that's all I could think of because they are kind of like really weird about it. That for me, that was a big thing. It was like we need an explanation for why we're not talking about the elephant in the room when we have Teresa in a glade full of a bunch of like sweaty hormonal teens. I'm not saying that.
And
go on.
Sorry, I was gonna say, and it made so much sense if you're thinking along your thoughts of why she would be up in the watchtower throwing things down at them to keep herself safe.
Right, because she's like, I mean,
she's in a room full of boys.
Yeah, and we can infer that she's supposed to be doing the same thing that Thomas did. Like, I don't know where I am. I don't know who any of you are. I don't have any of my memories. Of course, I'm freaking out. But Teresa has the added threat of being a woman surrounded by boys whose society clearly only works because they, you know, murdered each other a bunch beforehand. There are a bunch of rules here that haven't been established, and that's a dangerous place for a woman to be. And I just feel like there was the opportunity to talk about what that might have been like, or what that would look like in terms of societal standards, both negative and positive. And even just like why are we not talking about the fact that she's a girl? It's not really that important other than the fact that she's a girl.
I feel like the other thing too is if they've been there for 3 years and say their hormones weren't turned off.
We don't know. I don't know anything about their hormones. I'm pretty sure.
I know. I'm just making an assumption because they just didn't have any desire apparently. If their hormones weren't turned off and it was just a bunch of boys for 3 years, I imagine there would be a lot of other stuff going on.
I would think so. I mean, first of all, how many boys are there? What are the odds that any of them is homosexual or bisexual? Right?
Yeah.
Or any other kind of, you know, way to express yourself sexually. I would assume like just being a dude in a dude's body that eventually you'd want to go off and relieve yourself of any sexual tension like that. Those are things that are going to happen.
With no one else,
even with no one else, right? If you're not interested in other dudes, but experimentation is a thing as well, right? If there's only dudes around, like there's I have no problems with those things. It's just like they must explain later on that there was like a hormones turned off, because otherwise this just seems too convenient.
It really does. It's just like there was no desire among any of them at any time in the entire 3 years that they were there.
Yeah.
Like that's just.
And now all of a sudden you huck a girl in there and nobody even talks about it. Like, oh, it's a girl. Yeah. Like they don't even do it like innocently where they're like, what would it be like to kiss her? Gulp. And it's like, yeah, but there would be more going on because these kids are like what, 16, 17? I mean, varying ages. Like Chuck looks like he's like younger than that, but you know, varying ages of pubescence, like they're gonna want to do something.
Yeah,
I don't know. That's the biggest thing for me is like the way Teresa is treated as both an autonomous narrative character because she's really just there. She's the girl, and there's nothing wrong with that because you know. We want to have diversity, and we want to have, if there's a girl in there, it certainly could change the dynamic, but she's not treated with the respect to the narrative in terms of like, what does Teresa do to change the plot other than just be a girl who's there, right? She doesn't act as an autonomous character. Like her effect on the plot is simply because somebody else put a girl in there, not because she was a girl doing something in the plot.
Yeah, I'm really trying to like bite this back, but we're like getting into my pitch a little.
Oh, okay. I was just gonna say
we're talking about Teresa so much.
Yeah, I mean Teresa's. To me, we get very little about Teresa, and she's the most interesting character simply because of her position in the glade. But I mean, yeah, I don't know, like. It's frustrating. I want to get back to the point that I was making before, though, which was simply that that Teresa's character is fairly bland. Actually, all of them are pretty bland. Even Thomas.
Yeah.
Like we don't get enough.
I had a really hard
personality.
time telling them apart.
Yeah, I mean, there's not a lot of really, and there's a lot of characters too to keep track of, so it's difficult. But yeah, I don't know. It was okay. I thought the part where Gally comes back and he's been stung by the Griever and is gonna try and kill Thomas. I mean, okay. Yeah.
How the hell did he get through?
I don't know.
Because I was thinking, I literally, as I was in bed last night, drifting off to sleep.
It's a bit of a plot hole.
How the fuck did he get? Because they had closed those doors on all of the, like, on the Grievers, and they were, like, basically locked in. Their only way out then at that point was, through the hole. And then it was just, how did he get through? He didn't have the quote unquote, like, key, as they were calling it, from the.
I think they showed him having a key in his hand when he walked through, but I have a theory about that, and I noticed that plot hole at the beginning, but I have a theory about that, and we'll see if it comes out true. I think my theory is that because they're testing these test subjects or whatever, my theory is that they actually like plucked Gally out, had him stung, and then put him in that situation so that someone would die in order to make the others feel the sacrifice. Like Chuck's death will wind up being part of the master plan to make the flare virus cure. You know what I mean? Like somehow this is what's going to happen. That's what I think.
Okay.
Like that he didn't actually make it out on his own. He was plucked out and put there in order to accomplish some kind of weird sacrifice goal. I got to tell you though, I'm having a hard time seeing where Wicked's end game is, and I remember it being very strange. It's going to be weirdly convoluted, and unless it's like brain harvesting, I mean, I bet you. I don't even know. I don't know. I just don't see where this end game is. And as cool as that is in terms of having like something to dangle in front of your reader or your audience, sometimes it's better to know what your villains want so that you can, watch the conflict. One of my favorite stories is a game called Tales of the Abyss. And in the end, we know that the main characters and the villains want the same thing, but their fundamental differences is how they want to go about it. One of them wants to save everyone who's in the world in order to keep everyone safe. And the other one wants to destroy this world in order to recreate like a new world with people who will actually treat each other better instead of teaching the people who are already there. And it's like, yeah, you both want the same thing. They want to save the world, but one of them wants to do it by creating a whole new world and getting rid of the old one, and the others want to salvage what we have left of this one. But they want the same goal. I realize that's not a great explanation, but it's a very complicated story, which involves a lot of fantasy stuff. So the point there is by the end, when they finally get to the final battle, you can see that they want the same things, but they cannot reconcile how they're going about it. It's kind of tragic, but it's a great way to show how two different characters can want the same thing very differently, or two different factions. And in this, I think what we wind up with is if I recall why I hated the book so much at the end, is because once we found out what the end goal was, it was so unsatisfying. After dangling that for so long, it's sort of just like, okay, what? How does this fit in with anything? I don't know. Yeah. There's also problems with power structure, problems with propaganda. I thought about doing propaganda again as my major theme, but it could have worked. It could have worked. Oh, it definitely could have worked, because we're talking about the memories that Thomas and Teresa have about how some of that will come up in my pitch, I think. But it was so hard to come up with what is my major theme for this series, because I don't remember really all that well what's going to happen next, because this movie doesn't give us enough to go on. Interesting premise, but not a lot of substance to grab onto, which is I think why the first books work so well. It's all intrigue, and why the second book and third book disappoint, because once you figure out what that intrigue that was keeping you reading is, you're just going to wind up being like, oh, that's it? That's dumb. Yeah. Or at least unsatisfying.
Yeah, and it's funny that you're saying that you can't see kind of what the end goal is, when we've both already read it, and you would think that watching the first movie would kind of kickstart those memories.
But the first movie is the best one.
But it's I know, but it's just weird that you would be like, that because I'm feeling the same thing. We both read it. I'm pretty sure I've watched all 3 movies. I have no idea what's going to happen next.
So that just
even though I've read it and watched the movies, because it's just so.
It's much like its characters.
Flat.
I remember certain things that I really, really hated. Like, I know that there's going to be certain things that come up in the second movie that I remember happening in the book that I hated, and then like got really frustrated when those things continued on in a trajectory. I was like, oh. What I'm referring to is in the second book when spoilers, when Teresa winds up betraying Thomas because she has to in order to like accomplish some goal, which I don't remember, that Wicked wants her to do, and then she like apologizes to him and is like, oh, like I had to do it because they told me in order to get this to happen, and he's like super angry at her, and then he winds up meeting Sonia, who's like another love interest for him, and then he winds up forgiving Teresa and going back to her, and I was like, dude, she like betrayed you because other people told her to, and you're just gonna forgive her? Oh, that was so infuriating.
Yeah, I do remember that. Well, I don't remember the entire thing, but I do remember there being Sonia, and I do remember the betrayal happening. But
and I think he forgives her in the end, and I was sort of like, what the fuck? Like, I feel like that's not something you forget, but I can't remember. It's been a long time, and I just remember being really disappointed. But do you have any other like goods or bads you want to go over before we get into pitches?
No.
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 Do you want to do your pitch first, or would you like me to?
I would like to go first because I'm feeling a little, I guess, flat with my own pitch too.
Okay. But I mean, it's hard to do anything.
This whole thing was very difficult to work with.
Yeah.
And you know what? I know that I'm going to regret this, but I completely took Teresa out.
Okay. Well, let's see what happens.
I'm going to regret it in the next movie. I know it. Or the third movie or something. Yeah. But we'll see. And I turned it into a TV show, a short TV show, as you had already.
I thought you were like preparing to be like, and I turned it into just gay, like the super most gayest thing ever.
I totally could have.
I mean, why not? Just dudes boning other dudes. I mean, not that it has to be part of the plot. It just can. It doesn't have to be like a major plot point, is what I mean. It can just be there, right?
I was more surprised. I was surprised at the amount of clothing that was always on them, because I feel like a lot of just my experience is that a lot of men, and I guess teenage boys, when they're out at the beach, they don't have their shirts on.
But how much of that is socialized? I often think about that too, and I'll go into that in my pitch a little bit too, like how much of their behavior, because there's no society, is socialized. So in our society, like it's okay for dudes to take certain articles of clothing off depending on where they are, and actually it's more okay for dudes to take articles of clothing off almost anywhere, right?
Yep.
Whereas women, it's not.
You're at the park,
yeah,
take your shirt off.
Whereas women, it's not. And at the same time, there's also like, if you're at the beach or at a pool, then it somehow becomes okay for like women to wear less clothing than men, even though in other environments it's like women are expected to wear more clothing than men. Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
Like what I'm talking about is like swimsuits actually, I think, cover less of the body, or like women's swimsuits can cover less of the body than men's swimsuits. And obviously there's like particular areas that you need to cover. But my point is like when in any other location outside of a pool or a bath or a bathhouse or a beach, it's like women have to cover up more than men. But when you're at a beach, it's less than men. That's when it becomes acceptable.
Yeah. It's weird.
It is weird, man. All of a sudden, like if you think about it, when you were out in society, seeing a woman in her bra and undies, right, would be like, oh, so scandalous. And yet when you go to the beach, you wind up in thinner clothing than what your bra and undies might be. Like a if you're wearing a bikini or even a one piece swimsuit are still pretty thin, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I don't know. Some people prefer one pieces because it makes them feel more comfortable without showing off that much skin. Power to you. Nothing wrong with either. My point is just, it's this weird sort of, we're okay with being
double
more
standard.
naked in certain places.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
anyway,
socialize. Anyway, get into your pitch. Sorry about that tangent.
No, that's fine. We're like, this is the CineCasters. If you're not having a tangent, I'd be worried.
Stop it.
So, I'm also renaming this not to 28, maze later or whatever it was, because that's can't believe you.
That's the best. No way.
I'm gonna call this no. I'm gonna call this The Scorched Earth season 1. And I guess it could have a title, but whatever. Either way, it focuses on the maze runners. I didn't understand the name because I was like, the maze runner. There's a lot of maze runners. Which one are we talking about? Obviously, it's Thomas, but
isn't it just called Maze Runner? I don't think it's called The Maze Runner.
Oh. Either way, which one are we talking about? So anyways, this one is gonna mostly focus on Albie and Thomas. And it might get a little weird with time, but I think that'll be okay. I think we'll be able to figure it out. I might need your help with that. I don't know. Anyways, so episode 1 starts with Albie on his way up the elevator. We start with Albie. He's obviously freaked out, doesn't remember anything. When he gets to the top, he sees this like pleasant field and a forest, but he's clearly still scared and alone. And then we cue the title card and the theme music. So from here on out, I just basically have like synopsis of each episode, because that would be way too much work to write out. Yeah,
I get that.
The whole plot of everything. So episode 1 basically follows Albie on his first day. And then, once his first day is done, then the rest of the month. But
like just Albie, like at the very beginning.
Just Albie, right at the very start. So it's mostly just him going through, checking out the glade, checking out the maze. And then we kind of see him work up a routine in his first month of he goes about, tries to find some food in the glade. And then he goes for a walk into the maze. Like he's just kind of staying really close to the door, but he's checking things out. And seeing what's going on. I figured it wouldn't actually be that dangerous yet for him because he's only one person. So I didn't want the grievers in there yet. So there's no real danger for him yet. But basically he gets his routine down. He kind of figures things out a little bit. He talks to himself a lot because that's kind of what you do when you're alone.
Yeah.
At least that's what I do.
30 days alone, by the way, in terms of like survival, is a long time. A long time to be alone.
Yeah. So he knows his name, so he scratches it into the wall, and that's where we can see him like counting the days down. So we know 30 days later, suddenly there's like a loud horn and the elevator comes back up with another person and a bunch of supplies. And that's episode 1. It's just him figuring out how the hell do I survive. Episode 2 starts the same way, but this time it's Thomas. And when he comes up from the elevator, instead of an empty glade, it's full of boys who are all the same age as him.
Oh, shit.
And then we see Albie, who looks a little bit more worn, clearly, than the first episode. But we can tell it's him.
Yeah.
We learn that it's been about 3 years since Albie's first day, or since the first episode. And then we see a few of the parallels. What I really wanted to do with these first 2 episodes was to show the difference, I guess. They wanted in the movie so badly to be like, oh, we're not going to tell you anything because you have to discover it all on your own. And I'm like, well, Albie already did all the discovering, so we can have all those really cool scenes through his eyes.
Yeah.
Where the first night when the doors start to close, he's like, oh, it's a good thing I'm not out there, right?
Or even just like we can, through this, you can also show like they constantly refer to how things are going to change. Things are changing. Things can't stay the same. And if we see like now there's grievers, but those weren't there when we watched Albie's first night. The maze changes, and we didn't know that Albie's first night. Now there's a bunch of more boys. We didn't, so things are clearly changing, but we don't have to like run it into people's heads. We can show that visually.
Exactly. That's what I wanted. So basically, we get the whole rundown for Thomas, where it's like the doors close every night, the maze changes, it's a dangerous place, and they tell him very firmly and clearly. And then we can see, Albie is taking charge. This is his place. He was the first one. Everyone respects him. And then, so basically I wasn't sure exactly what the plot that I wanted. Like, I wasn't sure what the plot would be for the second episode. of like what's going on. I guess Thomas is just getting used to being
Well, you could
there.
sort of just have it parallel the first episode, except now there's a bunch more people, so we can see how things change. And then slowly
kind of
introduce like your overarching kind of plot.
Yeah, so then you would have that time where Thomas would be able to meet the different groups of the people and learn what they do. So they've got the cookers and the growers and the, I don't know what the slicers were.
I think they were tree cutters.
Oh yeah, that would make sense. And then the runners and whatever. And then Thomas would obviously take interest in the runners because
Plot.
The plot. Yeah. So episode 3, we're back with just Albie.
Okay.
Alone. But this is it's the scene right at the end of the first episode where it comes up and there's another person in the elevator, and this is Newt. He is the second person to come up, and we get their first interactions, and they're figuring things out. They butt heads a lot because they're both like, I don't understand what's going on. I don't know who you are. I don't know who I am. I don't know why we're here. Suddenly Albie has someone to talk to, but there's so many questions between the two of them that they don't tend to agree a lot. And they don't agree with how to keep themselves safe either. Albie insists that he should keep going out into the maze and see maybe there's other safe places like their little glade. Maybe there's other resources out there. And then one day while he's out exploring and Newt is back at home, he sees a griever. And that's when we first get that first interaction with the griever, and he runs and he doesn't get stung or anything. So he's okay despite the crazy danger. Yeah. So after that, Albie and Newt start to work together a little bit more because he's like, it's dangerous out there, but I think that's still where the answer lies. And Newt is like, well, I don't want to go out there. That's not for me. But I will help build up the glade. Like, I'll help build up a place so that we can still rest easy at night and whatever, and have a reliable source of food and all that stuff. And then this is still episode 3, but we switch to Newt and Thomas, and we learn that Newt is kind of like the taskmaster. So Albie is like the head honcho, but Newt is the guy who exacts his orders, right? And we get to see them together, Newt and Albie together now, and they're like the closest brothers you've ever met. Yeah, they've been together for 3 years. So, and Newt is basically there to be like, don't argue with us because we've been here for 3 years. We know it's not safe out there. Albie was the first one to see the grievers, and just kind of relaying the same, not relaying all of the same information that we just learned at the start of the episode, but still just reinforcing, I guess is the word I was looking for. Yeah. And then this is the episode that'll end with one of the gladers attacking Thomas, and then we find out that he was stung. Yeah. Yeah. So episode 4 starts with the gladers ousting the one that attacked Thomas. I can't remember anyone's name, so I feel really bad. Ben, thank you. I thought that was it. So Albie decides to go back into the maze for the first time in a year. Find out that he has not been out in the maze in a long time. But he goes out with Minho. Minho, yeah. And so we get flashbacks while he's out in the maze of some of the previous times when he was out teaching the first few, quote unquote, maze runners. And so that would be really, I guess, a neat thing to see. Maybe we could see how he trained Minho. Yeah. Right? And now it's kind of Minho is the one who's like, oh, no, you're forgetting it's this way. Yeah. So that could be really interesting. And then back in the glade, Thomas and Newt are working together again. This time they're helping make dinner instead of, I guess we're working on growing food the day before. And then someone notices that Mino and Albie aren't back yet. People start panicking. The doors start closing. And then they see Mino and Albie, and the same kind of thing happens. Thomas takes the opportunity to run into the maze. Episode 5 is just that one like part where they're just in the maze at night. Same thing happens. I didn't change any of that. Episode 6 is mostly just fever dreams. Albie is like watching his friends dying, all of his friends dying to the grievers. We see that the reason he stopped running is because one of his friends got stung. And then he kind of blames himself for it. And then like he's just having fever dreams. He sees Thomas in his dreams. He learns a little bit about the experiment, but we don't get a whole lot of it. We're just seeing little bits and pieces, so we don't know everything about it. Back in the glade, outside of the dreams, Thomas and the rest are arguing and fighting about what to do next. Newt decides, yes, Thomas is going to be a runner, but he still needs to be punished for what he did, for like taking that risk upon himself. And he gets a night in the pit with no food. And then while they're bringing him to the pit, the elevator comes up, surprising everyone, with the 2 of those blue vials again, and a note that says good luck.
Oh.
And that's it.
That's it.
That's all that came up. And so they're trying to figure out what it means, and they decide to give Albie one of the vials and see what happens. And then they take Thomas to the pit, and we end with him just drifting off to sleep. Yeah. Episode 7, Mino takes Thomas out to train him as a runner. At least that's what he said. But once they get out there, you can see it's different from when Albie was training Mino. He's not taking him just around the immediate places around the door. He's taking him really far out. And they slow down as they get kind of to the outer part of the maze. Mino was like, oh, I was right. And then we see him take out the piece of Griever that we didn't see earlier in the season. So this is here we'll get a conversation about how the maze has the same pattern. There was nothing left to explore, but Mino had a hunch that the Griever that Thomas had killed had to come from somewhere. So he went back and grabbed the thing, the beeping thing, or the flashing light thing out of the Griever that was squished, and it said 7, so he's like, well, maybe that might come from section 7. So it was Mino that did the thinking for this. And he said I was training you, but none of the other runners wanted to go with me. I feel bad for not telling you sooner, but whatever. You're the only one who would like willingly run out there to save anyone. So figured you wouldn't hold it against him, right? Or Mino figured that Thomas wouldn't hold it against him. And then we can have that same scene where they, walk through and it's not supposed to be open, but here it is. Section 7 is open. I also thought it was really funny that this correlated because it's episode 7. They're in section 7. And then we could have that same scene where they find that hole and then run back and the doors stay open at the end. And then that's the end of episode 7. So the last episode is actually a 2-parter. Episode 8 starts with Albie. He's awake. He insists on talking to Thomas, but the glade is panicking because
the doors
haven't closed. And so Thomas is like, I promise I'll talk to you after this if we survive the night. So they cue the fight. Everything happens. People die. What ends up happening, instead of whatever the heck happened in that one in this scene in the movie, Thomas throws himself in the way to save Newt, and Thomas gets stung. And then we can immediately move into some like feverish flashbacks from Thomas's past, and some of it lines up with the ones that we saw in episode 6 from Albie. Episode 8, part 2 starts in the pit. Thomas wakes up down there and he remembers almost everything. Albie is watching from above. Albie did not die. Thomas is like crying. He's like, I can't believe I was one of them, one of the people that put everyone here, and now I'm in here. And Albie shakes his head and he's like, as long as you understand, like, it doesn't matter who you are, but we have to know that you're now like one of us because you're here. And he's like, I just want to make sure that you're here, that you are one of us now, that you remember you're not going to act for them. And he's like, no, like, I would never act for them. Even when I was one of them, I had my doubts. And that's good enough for Albie. He trusts him. So then, the rest of that is just basically Thomas and Mino leading them out. Albie, the group of boys, because I took Chuck out of here too.
Yeah.
At least I made him a less major character.
Which isn't hard to do.
And yeah, I actually kind of forgot about him while I was writing it originally. And then I got to the end and went, oh, I don't have anyone to kill off here. Darn. But basically this part is Albie, Thomas, Newt, and some of the other guys. Newt has never been in the maze, so this, and like maybe one or two of them have never been in the maze. So this is like all new territory for them. And then some of them die fighting the Grievers at the end, same kind of fight. And then this time, as they're like right there, Albie jumps in front of a Griever to again save Newt and Thomas, who have the key, and they head on out. And they peek into the underground hallway thing, and they see a door that says exit. And that's the end. That's the end.
What I like about yours is you haven't actually like changed all that much plot wise, so that leaves you open to do some stuff like next episode, next movie, depending on what you want to do with it, like depending on what happens, because it's like you still have basically the same setup, but you've reorganized the structure. So in a lot of ways, that was sort of like very interesting way to wait for the next movie, because it doesn't explain a lot in this movie. So yes. I was a bit more go on.
The thing that I really wanted to try is, apparently the movie really liked showing and not telling, but they did it in a way that I really hated. So I was like, we're going to show and we're not going to tell, and it's going to work.
I think that works pretty well. The only thing that I did in my movie that was different was in my pitch, I made some pretty broad claims, like, and changed big things. So we'll see how those work out as we move forward. But my movie starts out with a nameless character riding an elevator up, and when he gets to the top, he's surrounded by a group of people. The elevator he was riding is filled with, stuff, resources and whatnot. So this kid has no idea who he is and no way of knowing who he is, but he starts to remember how to speak and what certain objects are called. Somehow he has these memories. The other people around him in the glade, and include Albie, even tell him that there was a lot of time has passed where they fought amongst themselves and developed, what was a respect and an understanding for the space, which they called the glade, and the outside space, which they call the maze, which they have like a deep, deep respect for it. So the Gladers have created a life and built on 3 rules: do your part, don't hurt one another, and respect the maze. But almost immediately, this newcomer kid, they call him Greenie for now, he wants to go into the maze, but everyone's like, nah. And those dudes are runners. Their job is to go into the maze and map the whole thing. And the new kid is shown around by Chuck, who is a former Greenie and is still trying to figure out what he wants to do. So he starts showing Thomas, or this kid, what he wants to do. So meanwhile, the new kid remembers his name and starts getting used to living in the glade. His name is Thomas. He discovers that the society in the glade have created like their own hierarchy of jobs, who's in charge, and there are 4 people in charge: Albie, Gally, Minho, and Newt. And basically Albie was the first. Gally is like responsible for like how the maze, how they treat the maze. Minho is responsible for the runners, and Newt is responsible for like who does work and what, and how that sort of functions out. So they built like a society, and the reason they're in charge is because each of them have been in the longest. The 4 of them have been in the maze the longest. They established the rules around what could be done and what couldn't, and what was possible by the maze. So the society treats this maze with like reverence, and Gally in particular is like quite zealous. The Gladers believe that the Grievers and the box are all controlled by the maze, and that like the same moving parts that control the box are the ones that control how the maze moves and how it opens and closes. And they believe like the maze gives them a new person every month, and it also has the ability to take them away unless they keep it happy. So when Albie and Minho are late coming back from the maze, Thomas breaks a rule. He runs into the maze to try and save them. And not only does he save Allie, but he also manages to survive the night and kill a Griever. But in this time, he like actually manages to like kill a Griever instead of just squishing it. He also sees that the maze walls shift and rotate, and some of them even like rise up and others sink into the ground. And he like, I want this to look like physically impossible, but also visually spectacular. So back in the glade, they finally get back. Albie is sick from the Griever sting, and Gally thinks that Thomas has upset the maze because he entered without an offering, and now he's killed a Griever, and he brought Albie back, and Gally thinks that the maze has claimed Gally by him being stung. Gally explains that the maze brought Thomas into existence, and therefore it probably needed some kind of payment, and that's Albie, and the maze has always provided them with what they need. So Gally strikes a deal. He tells Newt and Minho he will not throw Albie back into the maze if Thomas is punished, and so Thomas is thrown in the pit, and he's made a runner. And in my version, Thomas didn't really want to go back after that night, because it was fucked. Chuck comes to the pit that night and offers Thomas some food, and the two talk about where they come from. And Chuck describes a feeling of like wanting to belong. He says that the maze might provide for them, like Gally says, but he doesn't seem to like, it doesn't care about them. It just sort of like exists, like not the way that we look after each other. We're like family, and he's describing a family, right? He's like, you got to find a family. But then some noise happens and people come running because the maze has provided another person. But they say this person looks different, the same but different. And apparently this person called Thomas by his name. And Gally has Thomas yanked from the pit, brought outside where this new person is waiting. And this new person says their name. They remember their name immediately, and it's Teresa. And we, the audience, know she's a girl, but the Gladers have no concept of what female or male are. So they always refer to her as he, because they don't have any concept of male versus female. Everyone in the Glade is male. We've seen this, but they don't understand that kind of differentiation. So Teresa speaks with Thomas and tells him like the only thing she can remember is her name, and that she had to tell Thomas like she knew, like she's like, I had the name Thomas, so I knew. I don't know who you are. I've never seen your face before. I don't remember, but I knew Thomas. So this emboldens Thomas. He's like, okay, so like we're connected somehow. And Teresa and her sameness, but her differentness. So it's very weird. So I'm going to use she, but none of the boys in the Glade would use she.
In the Glade would?
Yeah.
Okay.
So she also has two strange-looking objects with her, and she says she knows that these are antidotes and they can cure sickness, any sickness. And Thomas is like, yeah, we got to give one of these to Albie. And with Teresa's instruction, she somehow knows how to use them. They administer to Albie, and he starts to get better, and they let him rest. By this time, it's morning, and Minho says it's time to go into the maze, and Thomas is like, well, okay, I guess I got to go do this. He doesn't want to go back in because the maze is fucked. And he tells Teresa, he's like, I'll come back. And he like somehow starts to feel protective of her. But he doesn't really know how to explain it. So before he goes into the maze, Minho takes Thomas to the maze runner's hut where they talk. And Minho shows Thomas how the maze works. And he wants to find, like, he's been trying to find some kind of order and sense. But the maze changes every night and it's never the same. There's no sequence. It's never the same. And he's been mapping it for years. It's never the same. Ever. What he also shows Thomas is that before they go in, that Gally insists that they have to like make a sacrifice to the maze, and Gally's been pushing and pushing for like bigger and better sacrifices, and Minho's like, if we, Gally believes that if we don't give the maze something as an offering, and Gally's starting to push for maybe they shouldn't go into the maze at all, or if they do, they need to offer up a person, right? The maze can give and the maze can take away, right? So, but both of them are like, let's not do that. We don't want to like hurt anyone or anything. So like they decide not to give an offering. And in the maze, they happen upon the dead Griever that Thomas killed. But it's not in the right spot. When he killed it, it was on the ground, and now it's like hung up in the middle of the air. So something in the logic of the maze has like shifted it into a different position. And it's higher up than when it was killed. And Thomas realizes that the map seems to be random, not because it's repeating on a 2D plane, but because the whole maze is actually 3-dimensional. So it's shifting in a way that doesn't make sense when you map it in 2 dimensions, but might make sense when you map it in 3 dimensions. So it's possible to see the pattern, not in 2, like when you're running on the ground, but there's actually like an up and a down to it, that it might be like rotating and shifting that way. So they pay attention not just to the ground, but what's up and around them. And they're like, the way out must be up. Like there's something to this. And it's not just out on the ground. So the pair head back to the glade with this news, only to find that there seems to be like some strange tension. Some of the gladers are starting to think that the maze is changing, and things are changing because Teresa is different, and the maze has like chosen or selected her to be this different person. The maze has given them this new person, right? Who's special, right? She's special. They don't understand that she's female. She's just different, and they want her, but they don't know why. Right?
Okay.
Both physically and like emotionally, sexually, but they don't know why. They have no concept of females. So they like revere her. And Chuck explains, he finds Albie and Minho, and he's like, some of the boys look at her in a weird way, and they apparently, like Gally says, she's like won them over with her like evil magic, but like Gally's on this other side where he says they need to respect the maze, and Teresa has no idea what's going on. So Thomas goes and speaks with some of the boys, but they're like weirdly possessive of Teresa, and he tells them off, and she of course is like, she's like, no, like you were the one who I've needed to say, you were the one who's like always been like, I connected with you first, so like something is like I trust you, but I don't trust the rest of them. So Gally's upset by this, and things were fine until Thomas showed up, but especially when Teresa showed up, and now everything is all fucked. And he's like, we should either give her to the maze or get rid of her. And Albie's awake now, and he confirms that he remembers there was something weird about Thomas, and he's also remembers, he's like, but they're the key out. The 2 of them are somehow the key out. Thomas and Newt and Minho explain that, they want to start a plan their way out. And Gally and his crew are like, no, we should stay. The maze gives. We don't want to upset the maze. We've already upset the maze, and it won't provide any money anymore if we keep, like, it won't provide for us if we keep fucking this up. Or it might even strike back. So some of the other boys just want to be near Teresa and claim that she's the special one. Even though she thinks Thomas is the special one because his name she remembered. So that night, the maze opens on 4 sides in the Grievers' attack, and Albie dies, saving Thomas and Teresa, claiming that they are special. And Gally blames Thomas for the changing things, and Teresa for somehow being different and other, and it's affecting the gladers. But they know they can't stay. Like Teresa, Thomas, and Minho, Chuck, and Newt, they're like, we can't stay. So they're like, so they try to leave, but the boys that think Teresa is special, and like the maze's gift to the gladers in this weirdly possessive way, and yes, there will be sexual undertones, they try to stop her because they're like, no, she can't leave. She's ours. And Gally's crew doesn't like want anyone to go into the maze, but they're like, yeah, we're gonna offer a peace offering and put an end to all this by giving the maze Teresa. And Teresa's like, yeah, no. And so they start attacking her, and she accidentally hits one of her like fans, I guess we'll call them, hits one of her fans on the head and knocks him out. And the others think that she's hurt him, which is against the rules, and they immediately turn on her. But also, she's just like, it was an accident. Like, I just wanted him to let go of me. It's weird. And she, of course, just, So Thomas, Newt, Teresa, and Minho are banished into the maze, and the dude that Teresa hit is left in the maze unconscious, so that Thomas's crew entering the maze will not cause the maze to strike back. It's like Gally is using it as an offering. And Thomas and his team wander through the maze, but can't find any way through or up. And night is fast approaching, which means the Grievers will start to hunt. But Thomas has an idea. He's like, once the night hits, we'll like, I'll make a plan. Like, that's when we'll watch how the maze moves, and we'll use that to our advantage. And Teresa watches in horror as the dude she hit wakes up, but gets taken by the Grievers, and she feels like it's her fault. She's like, holy shit, like, that happened because of me. And Thomas is like, no, like, that was Gally's fault. Like, we know you didn't mean to hurt him. And she's like, no, he died. He wasn't conscious because of me. So the maze starts to change, and she hasn't moved on from this, but the maze starts to change, and like, there's no sections or anything, but Thomas gets onto a part that's going up, like, as the part that was the floor is all of a sudden going up, and he gets everyone on, and all of a sudden, he sees like the whole maze from the top advantage, and they simply just walk out because they're on top of the wall now. and they never thought to like make it look 3D. They're still hunted by grievers, though. So they manage to make it all the way out to the facility, and a few of the gladers die by griever, and they finally make it out when Galley shows up. And he followed them because everyone else died in the glade that night by griever attack. And he admits that he is also actually obsessed with Teresa, and he's been stung by a griever and followed her himself. And he's like Thomas blocks him. He's like, you can't touch Teresa. And Galley's like, Thomas must be special because Teresa chose him. But if he was dead, then Teresa might choose somebody else like me. So he tries to go and kill Thomas, but Chuck stands in his way and gets impaled on a stick. And Minho and Newt manage to push Galley back, and what we see is Galley looks down and he sees this object on the ground, and none of them seem to know what it is, but Galley recognizes it, picks it up, and shoots himself in the head. None of them, none of the gladers would know what a gun is, but Galley picks it up and shoots himself in the head, and they're all like, whoa, what the fuck? And there's blood and shit. Chuck dies in Thomas's arm, and he says, he's like, you have to find a family. Like, we didn't belong in the maze. You have to find a place where you belong and a family that wants you. Right? Like, and maybe that's with Teresa, I don't know, but you have to find this family. And Teresa finds and activates a message from a woman named Dr. Ava Page, and she explains that Teresa is what we call a girl. Same with Ava Page. She's like, I'm a female, and this is different from the boys and the boys that were in the glade, and it's her femaleness that makes her special. Whoever she has picked is also special and will lead the rest of the gladers into the next stage of trials, and that will help liberate the world from illness and strife, but she doesn't specifically say what that illness and strife are, and the movie ends with the group minus Chuck opening a door into the blinding sun. So we'll see what happens next time. So I made some significant changes. I don't know how those are going to come to bite me in the back.
You made a lot of significant changes. I took out entire characters, so...
I also, I needed... I mean, the reason that I made significant changes is because I basically set up a few things. We'll see if those are just wind up being loose ends or if they actually are important. But I did set up quite a few things just in case whatever happens in the next two movies doesn't line up. I'll have at least a few ways to make them line up. But I'm hoping they will actually line up because I have some pretty neat ideas about a few things. So we'll see what happens. Yeah. So again, both of us were like, we can't really talk about much because there's not much there, and this is all set up. But I am excited to see what we come up with in the next episodes. So, so stay tuned for next week. Yeah. It's going to be good. But any last minute thoughts about the Maze Runner?
I wish that it was actually just about Albie. It would have been a lot more interesting.
Yeah, I feel like we needed a bit more time with each of these characters, but. Yeah. Where can people find you?
You can find me at twitch.tv/AlyssaLou with 3 O's, or you can find my my craftist stuff at Alyssa Rose Handmade on, not Instagram. Well, yeah, I guess Instagram, but also Etsy.
Yeah. You can find our band Robot Philosopher anywhere you listen to music. We put out an album earlier this month. It'll be last month by the time this comes out. It's called Astral Migration. It's really, really good. Very proud of it.
It's really good.
It's really good. And
really good.
You can check out our other channel, the CineMasters, for more scripted content where we do essays and stuff like that. And of course, way more episodes of the podcast, both old and new, are coming out every week. So stick around for those. Thank you so much for chilling with us. Be sure to tune in next week. Peace out.
Bye.